Hello and welcome to this GarrettCom Training presentation on advanced VLANs using the Graphical User Interface. Okay, so we left off in a previous video by creating 3 different VLANs, one for IP phones, one for IP cameras and one for PCs. Now, what I wanted to cover in this video is how to verify that the setup's been done correctly. So, as an example, VLAN 10, we've added port 10 to VLAN 10. How do we verify that we've actually specified the default ID and we haven't forgot that step? So what we can do is we can go down to the filter section, and in here it lists the port number, say port 10, and the default ID which is assigned to that port. So here we can see it's port, VLAN 10, so we know it's been done correctly. For the ports in VLAN 20, we have ports 16 and 20 used as end user device ports. Let's verify that those ports are correctly set up as regards their default IDs. So port 16, default ID of 20, port 20, default ID of 20. So that covers how to verify the default IDs for the end user devices. We can see from the table what ports are members of which VLANs. If we want to check that tagging ports are doing their job, what we can do is we can go to the tagging window, and in here it lists the ports. Port 23 is tagging for VLANs 10 and VLAN 20. 24 is tagging for VLANs 10 and VLANs 20. Notice it's not tagging for VLAN 1, which is our default untagged VLAN. So this verification has actually been useful, because if you notice, when we went to the tagging section, what I've done is removed the tagging options for port 23 and 24 to tag for VLAN 30. And we can see that although VLAN 30 is in the list, it's not actually tagging on ports 23 and 24 for VLAN 30. So we can see that we need to do that now. So let's just do that as a recap. Also, if you check in the list, we can see that ports 23 and 24 are not even members yet of VLAN 30. So before we can tag for those ports, we need to add those ports into that VLAN. So before we can tag for that VLAN, we need to add those ports to that VLAN. So let's do that now by clicking on the pencil. So here we can edit the VLAN. So all we need to do is go down to ports 23 and 24, click OK, and now they've been added. Now that they are added, we can go to the port settings. We can type in 23 and 24 and specify now that 23 and 24 are also tagging for VLAN 30. Okay. And if we go to the tagging section, here we can see 23 is tagging for VLAN 30 and 24 is tagging for VLAN 30 as well. So perfect. What we need to do now is, if I go back to the settings, we can see it's pending rather than active. So how do we sort that out? We just go to status and we go to VLAN ID, VLAN 30, and select start and OK. Now we can see it's active. Okay. If we want to delete a VLAN, what we can do is we can click on the red X, but if we try and delete it while it's active, it complains and says you can't delete it. So if you want to delete a VLAN, go to status, select the VLAN from the list, stop the VLAN, click OK. The status changes from active to pending. Then we can click on the red X. It asks us if we want to delete this VLAN. Yes, we do, and then it's deleted. So that's how to, if we want to add in a VLAN at the end here, we can do that. So we can add it back in, VLAN 30, let's call that VLAN test, and let's add in a, say port 4 and port 5, and again the 2 tagging ports, 23 and 24. We can add this back in. So we can add them, we can edit them. Suppose we don't like the name test, we can go back in, click on the pencil, and just change that to PCs. which is what it was before. It's changing. Again, we would have to go in and specify the default VLANs for your end devices and also the tagging for the tagging ports for VLAN 30. What I would recommend is if you're going to make significant changes to the VLANs, rather than editing the VLAN, probably what's best is just to delete it entirely and re-add the VLAN following the steps we covered in the previous video. Editing is really for small changes, such as maybe adding or removing one port, or maybe just changing the name. But if you're going to make sort of significant changes, then probably best just to start from scratch, delete that VLAN and rebuild it from start. It's probably quicker and safer to do it that way, just less complicated. Some of the other points we missed from the previous video were, if I go into the add section here, we can see an option for MGMNT, which is short for management. So if I go to the pencil on, say, VLAN 10, we can see that management is enabled. We can have enable or disable. If we have enabled, what that means is that devices within that VLAN can log into the switch like we are logged into switch now via the Graphical User Interface, or they can log in via the command line, via the Telnet or SSH. If we select the option for management to be disabled, what that means is that devices in that VLAN, so devices in VLAN 10, in this specific instance, any device which is connected to port 10 is not allowed to manage this device, this switch. So you prohibit the management of the switches based on what VLAN the end devices are assigned to. So we can further enhance security by enabling or disabling management for a specific VLAN. And that's what we do here. So we can enable it or disable it. So if I disable it, then any device which is connected to port 10 is in VLAN 10, and devices in VLAN 10 are not allowed to manage the switches. Final thing to note is that if you want to see what VLAN a port belongs to, another way to do that is to click on the graphical display, then click on any one of the ports, say port 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And here we can see that port 10, for example, is a member of VLAN 1 and VLAN 10. Port 16 is a member of VLAN 1 and VLAN 20. So it's perfectly fine for ports to belong to multiple VLANs. In fact, it's required if you're a tagged port, you need to belong to all the VLANs in order to tag for those VLANs. And that's why we need to specify the default ID, because if a frame is received on the port and there's no tag to identify what VLAN that frame belongs to, the switch has to make a decision as to which VLAN to put that frame in. Now, if it's a tagged port, it's already a member of several VLANs, so without the tag, it doesn't know which VLAN it should choose, which is why the default is important. So we specify the default to tell the switch if it receives a frame without a tag, by default it needs to add it to the default VLAN. Okay, so that completes this video on the advanced VLAN features in the Graphical User Interface. There are some settings, options in the settings such as join and leave, and the filtering, but by and large these are not used too often, necessary. I've pretty much covered everything, all of the key features you need to know about. I hope this has been interesting for you. I hope it's been helpful. And on behalf of GarrettCom, I'd like to thank you for your time.